Well, I'm going to go ahead and begin. My name is Shelley Moore Capito, Senator from the great state of West Virginia. I have my fellow Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Senator Daines from Montana, Chairman Inhofe from Oklahoma, and our Attorney General from Texas, and Alex Mooney from West Virginia. We had planned to have others, but the arguments have gone longer, and I'm going to take that as a good sign, because I think that shows, absolutely how very important the decisions that are going to be made today. I want to congratulate our West Virginia Attorney General, Patrick Morrisey. He'll be here shortly, I think. He led the charge, and West Virginia led the way in these oral arguments to talk about really the vast and overreaching regulatory regime that the president has moved forward with his Clean Power Plan. There's obvious, clear opposition to this, but the president moved forward. He's attempted to skirt, I believe, the legal limits of the Clean Air Act and impose new regulations after regulation. He has directed his EPA to restructure the entire energy system in a matter that costs billions of dollars. And it's based on unreasonable assumptions. I'm sure that was part of the argument today. Increase our energy bills, will make a grid unreliable, and have little impact on the environment. I'm a member of the EPW committee, which Chairman Inhofe is here with me today, and he knows that we have had hearing after hearing trying to break through to talk about not just for me, mostly the economic impacts of this, but also the energy impacts of this far-reaching decision. We have the ARENA bill that would help us protect us from this. I also led the Congressional Review Act, which was the resolutions of disapproval. There were two of them on existing and new coal-fired power plants that the president did not accept. And so, interesting, we're down to this. We're down to 150 entities, including 27 states, 24 trade associations, 37 electric rural co-ops, and 3 labor unions have joined together in opposition to this. As you all know, in February, the Supreme Court joined the charge by questioning the legal soundness of this rule and putting a stay on this rule. And that's very unprecedented. I'm not an attorney, but I understand that it is. And every day we hear new stories as I travel through the state of West Virginia of people who have lost their jobs, who are concerned about the potential for losing their jobs, and of the devastating economic impacts and grid reliability and electrical bills that would be accompanied with this. We already have 6 counties in our state that are considered to be in an extreme depression. Many of that is the loss of coal jobs and the war on coal that we've been experiencing. So, an affordable energy matters to everybody, but it really matters to those who are on fixed incomes, on the lower rungs, trying to get started. And this Clean Power Plan, we believe, endangers that ability to get affordable, accessible, reliable energy in all of our states. So this brings a lot of vulnerabilities to our most vulnerable, but also to all of our states' economies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Jim Inhofe. I think the order will go as Chairman Inhofe, Senator Manchin, Senator Daines, Attorney General, and Alex Mooney from representative from West Virginia. So.
Great, Shelley. Let me just put this in a little historic perspective, because a lot of people forget how long this fight's been going on. We're talking about 15 years. I can remember when I was the bad guy back to question the science way back at in 2001, and that was when the first bill was introduced to try to have a cap and trade. Well, we did a little calculating, and we found that the cost of that would be the same as it would be today. The range was always been and has always been between $300 and $400 billion. So I remember one time when we had the first director of the EPA that was under President Obama coming in, and I asked the question. I said, you know, if we were to pass this legislation, would this have the effect of reducing CO2 worldwide? And she said, well, of course it wouldn't. It wouldn't, because this isn't where the problem is. The problem's in China, the problem's in India, the problem's in Mexico. And so people started thinking, is it really going to be worthwhile if we punish ourselves with the largest tax increase in history, and it doesn't do any good in terms of reducing CO2? So anyway, that was way back in '02 that bill was defeated, and it's been defeated almost every year since then. Never once has the Senate voted to accept a type of legislation that would impose a cap and trade. So what did this president do? The same thing he does with other issues. If he can't get it done through legislation, he tries to do it through regulation. Well, his regulation that he's come out with is to have a 27% reduction in CO2 by 2025. Well, we looked into it. We actually tried. Senator Capito will tell you that we tried to have a hearing with the EPA to show what we could and could not do, how they're going to possibly try to reduce CO2. They didn't even show up. There's no way that they can do it. And I think everyone is fully aware of that now. So with that, we look at the other things that have come out of these meetings, these annual meetings that put on by the UN. And it's really kind of interesting because they talk about the great success that they had in China coming to the table. Well, you know what China's deal was, what they agreed to do? They will increase, not decrease, their CO2 emissions until 2025, and then we'll consider doing something about it. That's supposedly a John Kerry victory. Well, anyway, I think that we now know that with the lawsuits that are taking place and with the hearings that we've had in our committee, and let me just say this about Senator Capito, the CRAs that we're doing actually passed. The majority of people in the United States Senate said, no, that regulation should not take place. Very quietly, though, the president vetoed it, and of course we don't have a veto-proof majority, and that didn't happen. We have a lot of heroes that came to our side from the Democrat Party, and of course Joe Manchin's one of them, and he's here today to express himself. We also will hear today from Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General. As Senator Capito mentioned, 27 states have filed lawsuits. My state of Oklahoma was one of the first. We've had hearing after hearing on this thing. And quite frankly, we've won the argument in the eyes of the American people. I can remember when it first started in 2001, the Gallup poll that came out in March always had it as the #1 or #2 concern in America. Today, it's number 15. So the public has caught on, and they know that the science is not there, and they also know that this regulation, the largest regulation, and would constitute the largest tax increase in this country, would not accomplish what people wanted to accomplish. So I applaud Senator Capito and all the others who have come in and have told the truth about this issue of cap and trade. Senator Manchin?
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. And I want to thank my colleague, Senator Capito, Senator Daines, Congressman Mooney, Attorney General. And I want to put more of a human touch to this and a face to it. The people we're talking about, the people that are most affected, are the miners and the miners' family. And they've given us the energy that basically has given this country the superpower, the status that we are. It's been a domestic energy that basically that we have produced. The heavy lifting that's been done, not just by the state of West Virginia, but other states, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Ohio, now Wyoming, Montana. It goes on, and they continue to do the heavy lifting. There's no way in shape and form can you allow an executive branch, and myself being a former governor, being an executive, there was no way I would have ever thought that I had the ability to make major policy change that affected people's lives without the input of the people's representative, which is the legislature. You just don't even think that that's possible or feasible to be done. And then having no plan at all to how does these people continue to live their life, how they provide for their families. You destroy a whole area. Shelley said 6 counties are in the depression. You know the difference between a depression and a recession? A recession is basically we've hit hard times, but we're coming back. We can make it. A recession is when you've given up. Whatever assets you've accumulated, you've left. And you leave those assets and move on because they have no value. That's a depression. We've gone through it before in this country in the 30s. We're going through it in parts of West Virginia today. There is no way that we can stand here and allow this to happen. No way whatsoever. No matter about the politics, Democrat or Republican, I don't care. The executive branch does not have that power. It was never given that power by the Constitution. And it was never meant to be carried out by a branch of a federal government, which is an administrative branch that can have those powers, and not having the ability to provide for the people they left behind. So we're not going to stand by and let anyone left behind in this country. If there's a major policy shift, that policy shift should take into account everyone that will be affected and their opportunities and ability to take care of themselves and their families. That wasn't done. And I think hopefully that we will prevail, and we will continue to fight until we are victorious in this. I have said this. I can tell you about a West Virginia miner. They're the most patriotic people in the nation. They've mined the coal, that made the steel, that built the guns and ships to defend the country. Most of them are veterans. Our little state has shed more blood than most any state for the cause of freedom. And all of these states are just they're hardworking people that all they say is give us a chance, give us an opportunity. Don't count us out and don't write us off. So I am very hopeful that we're going to be very successful in this, and I hope that the D.C. Circuit is going to understand that these are the people that give us the country we have today. These are the people that have sacrificed, and we're not going to stand by and say we have forgotten you. And I said in West Virginia, we feel like the returning Vietnam veteran. Those of us who are old enough, that's our era. The returning Vietnam veteran did exactly what the country asked, right, wrong, or indifferent. They answered the call of duty. The miners of America have answered the call of duty. They have done everything that's been asked of them. And now all of a sudden we say, well, thank you, but no thank you. So with that, my good friend from Montana, Steve Daines, and I've been to Montana many times, and it's a wonderful state and good people that work hard and fight hard, and they have good miners there too. So with that, I want Steve to come forward and basically share with us your thoughts.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Joe. You might ask yourself, why is a Montanan standing here today? You understand somebody from West Virginia. Why Montana? Well, Montana has more recoverable coal than any other state in the Union. And second, this EPA's Clean Power Plan affects Montana more than any other state in the United States. So I'm grateful that our Attorney General Tim Fox, was one of the 27 Attorney Generals that filed suit to stop this power plan. And he is here today, in fact, as part of the DC District Court arguments. This is going to be the largest economic disaster in 30 years for Montana if the EPA's Clean Power Plan is enacted. It is an affront to our Boilermakers. It's an affront to our pipe fitters. It is an affront to our rail workers. It is an affront to the people who live in Colstrip, Montana, whose livelihoods depend on this. The University of Montana conducted a study several months ago. They concluded that the EPA power plan will result in the loss of 7,000 jobs, many of those good union jobs, over $500 million a year in lost income, and $145 million a year in lost tax revenue that funds our teachers, our schools, and our infrastructure. On the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana, they currently have an unemployment rate of about 35%. Without these coal jobs, their unemployment rate will go to over 80%. This EPA Clean Power Plan will have a devastating effect on the people who can afford it the least, as well as a double-digit increase in utility prices in Montana. We had EPA Director Gina McCarthy come before one of our Senate hearings. I questioned her about this. And in fact, she said that the effect, I challenged her, I said, the effect on the global climate will be negligible because of the EPA power plan. In fact, there was a study done that shows that the outcome, the effect of the EPA power plan is 0.02 degrees centigrade on the global temperature. I challenged her to challenge me on those facts, and she didn't. So we know the economic effect is devastating. For what? For what? For virtually a negligible impact overall on the global climate. And that's why I'm grateful that there was a Supreme Court that stopped this power plan temporarily here while they argue it out now in the lower court. Our founding fathers never envisioned this overreach, this tyranny of power that we have right now in the White House. And they have buildings behind us here, the United States Supreme Court, and of course we have the legislative branch. The House was able to push back on it. We couldn't get 60 votes in the Senate. But thankfully, before Justice Scalia passed away, the court put in place a stay on this power plan. And we can have a thoughtful argument today. I'm proud of our attorney generals from the 27 states that stood up on behalf of their people to make their argument. So I want to also thank my peers here in the United States Senate as well in the House, Democrats and Republicans here standing today, believing this president has overreached, and thankful we have a court that's hearing these arguments today on behalf of the people we represent.
So my name is Ken Paxton. I'm Texas Attorney General. I've had the great opportunity to co-lead with West Virginia in this case. It's pretty remarkable that we have 27 of the 50 states that are suing the federal government. I've been over there all day taking notes, and I will not dispute the fact that the EPA has the obligation or the right to regulate this industry, but what I do dispute is the EPA's right to eliminate or abolish an entire industry. And you might ask, why would I say that they're going to abolish an entire industry? I say that because the standards that are being set up are largely unattainable by any existing source. However, the good news is that the EPA has offered two solutions to that. You can either go out of business, or you can, if you don't go out of business, you can just pay your competitors a subsidy. Well, as a business owner, I don't know if any of you have ever been business owners, but neither of those options are particularly good for a business long-term bright future. We clearly have an issue with separation of powers, and we know that our founders were very leery of power in the hands of too few. And in this case, we clearly have an agency in the executive branch creating law and creating a transformational expansion of EPA power, which was clearly not authorized by these people behind me. We also know that we have a violation of the 10th Amendment. The states had regulatory authority over existing sources, and that is being stripped, again, with no congressional approval. Finally, I'd like to say that this is going to have a dramatic impact, not just on West Virginia and Montana, but it's going to have a dramatic impact on my state. It's going to have a dramatic impact on every state. The studies that I've seen estimate that between 29 and 39 billion per year costs once this is implemented. There's also the study that shows that between 2022 and 2033 that household spending will be reduced by 79 billion. We know that reliability will be affected, and we also know that this will cost jobs, and we know that this is going to affect those who can least afford it, which is those who are poor, who are on fixed incomes. I know that the EPA has given this as an example of cooperative federalism. Unfortunately, it looks more like coercive federalism. And that's why we're here to fight this, and we hope and expect to prevail. And next, I think we have a congressman that's going to speak. Thank you.
Congressman Alex Mooney from West Virginia also. Just proud to support our Attorney General from West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey, and all the Attorney Generals leading this effort, representing the House side, and a lot of my House colleagues are on their way over. It's about time we stop this president from making up the laws just because he wants to and going around Congress and going outside of his authority. It needs to stop. We are a three-branch government, and he doesn't have the right to make up these laws. We need to stop it. So I'm proud to support this on behalf of the hard-working coal miners around the country who deserve better than this. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Congressman Morgan Griffith of the coal part of Virginia.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This is an important day, and hopefully the court will see fit to do what is the clear meaning of the law and the Constitution. I've got to tell you, since I first started looking at this, I don't understand how they think they have authority under 111D when they already regulate electric generation units under 112. But somehow they've come up with a theory. What's really interesting is, and I got to ask one of the folks at the EPA one time, well, how do you fit that in juxtaposition with the long history of these sections where this has never been the interpretation before, and in fact found a case within the last decade where on a different issue but related to 111D and 112, the court said, you can't do this, but I'm not going to discuss it any further because the EPA lawyers have already conceded this point. In that case, they conceded the point. They appealed other points, but they didn't appeal that one. They just conceded it, but now they come up with a new theory. It's absolutely amazing. And then in regard to the 10th Amendment, I was very pleased to be there in the committee when Lawrence Tribe came to testify. A professor of the current president's, who said, look, I may agree with what the EPA is trying to do, but you can't burn the Constitution in the process of doing it. And that's a paraphrase, but you can't burn the Constitution in an effort to get to the purposes that you wish. And I'd be happy to get you all the exact quote on that. I did not bring it over with me, but I'm happy to give it to you. And then recently we had a former employee of the Department of Energy who left there. He was a political appointee, and he said, look, I believe in global warming, I believe in all of this, but the Clean Power Plan will not affect global warming to any significant degree. And in fact, he said that the depth of the ocean would be reduced under the Clean Power Plan about the same amount as the average sheet of paper. And that's after a number of years. That's it, a sheet of paper, and we're going to throw away thousands of jobs and billions of dollars. I yield back.
Yeah. Thank you. As you notice, we've been joined by some attorneys general. We have the Attorney General from my state of West Virginia, who I'm going to introduce next and let him introduce. We have the Attorney General from Oklahoma, I'm going to assume, Louisiana, and Wyoming. So I know that they've had a big day presenting our case, our unified case, and it's my pleasure to introduce the lead attorney, or the lead Attorney General from the great state of West Virginia, Patrick Morrissey. Patrick, thanks for what you're doing. Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and thanks to everyone for joining us here today. As you know, we recently finished up a full day of oral arguments before the D.C. Circuit. This is really unprecedented in nature. Back in February, after the Supreme Court issued a stay on this lawless regulation, we said that we were looking forward to having our day in court on the merits. Today was that day, and I think that the collective coalition was able to put very strong legal arguments forward as to why this regulation is unlawful and why it should be set aside. I think there were particularly good arguments made on a number of points, but in particular, I thought some of the points that we made with respect to forcing owners and operators of coal-fired power plants to subsidize other forms of energy really resonated with the court. There were also very strong arguments made with respect to the lack of constitutionality of this particular regulation. And I think that the arguments that were put forth also really captured the court's attention. At the end of the day, I'm not going to make any predictions as to whether we'll win at the D.C. Circuit. But I've been very clear from the outset since I initiated this lawsuit several years ago. The fact is that the EPA lacks the authority to regulate in this space, and we believe that we ultimately will prevail. We don't know when, we don't know where, but our legal arguments are strong, and I'm pleased that we've been able to work to put together a very large national bipartisan coalition. We're joined by 27 states. We also have labor unions, consumer groups. We have a lot of support from within Congress, businesses, and utilities. This is a coalition that understands that you can't simply ignore the rule of law and prevail. And what this administration is trying to do really hurts coal miners. It'll increase the price of electricity, and obviously will put the reliability of the power grid at risk. That's why I fight. I fight for coal miners, West Virginia, and for the rule of law. And so I'm pleased that everyone could come here today. And I'd like to turn this over to one of my colleagues in this effort. Scott Pruitt from Oklahoma has also done a lot of good work. There are a lot of good leaders in this effort. You heard from Texas, hear from Oklahoma, Louisiana. I'd like to give him a couple minutes to talk about his perspective on today. Thank you.
Thank you, General Morrissey. And as General Morrissey indicated, this has been a very historical and consequential day. One, the partnership of the states, we somewhat take for granted now. 27 states joining together to sue the EPA with respect to an unlawful regulation before 2010 was unprecedented. Since 2010, because of this administration's view of how the states should be treated as mere vessels of federal will, we've seen any number of cases that have been filed, not only filed, but won. And this is another example of the states joining together to make sure that the very precious balance of power between Washington, D.C. and the states is preserved. The senators and congressmen that you've heard from, in this process, we had Lawrence Tribe at the court today argue that the horizontal separation of powers has been abused and disrespected by the EPA. It is the senators and the congressmen that should join together to give a clear statement about what they would have the EPA to do with respect to emission control measures that are put in place by the EPA. They've disregarded that entirely. I particularly want to thank Senator Inhofe and his leadership of EPW and in the Senate of making sure that the EPA is held accountable in these processes, and our lawsuit is another step toward that. So it's been a very important day. It's very appropriate that we've joined together with senators and congressmen as attorneys general, because as a group, it is us together that has tried to make a difference in maintaining rule of law and checks and balances in this very important process. It cannot be overlooked that the ultimate payer of the abuses of the EPA in this matter are consumers across the country. Rates will go up substantially in Oklahoma. Rates will go up substantially across this country, and all without representation, and all because the EPA has acted outside of its scope of authority. So we're giving voice to those consumers, both residential and manufacturers, and we're making sure that the Constitution and the balance of power is preserved through this case. Thanks very much.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Landry. I'm the Attorney General in Louisiana. I'll tell you that today is a historic day, but it's a sad, historic day. I can only echo the words of Professor Tribe today when he said that EPA doesn't stand for the Environmental Parliamentary Agency. It stands for the Environmental Protection Agency, because the rule-making body, the law-making body in this country is behind us. It isn't in the administration, and in a way that this administration has continuously used its executive power, abusing the Constitution and overreaching its authority. And so I was pleased today at the way that the states and many lawmakers behind us have supported this effort in trying to curtail the executive authority that is killing jobs in this country and also stands to increase the electric rates of every consumer out there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I better adjust. I'm Peter. Thank you. I'm Peter Michael, the Attorney General of the state of Wyoming. I just have a couple of very brief comments. First of all, I want to thank General Morrissey and West Virginia for the lead they took on this case. I want to thank the other 27 states who joined together to try to rein in the unlawful conduct of the Environmental Protection Agency. Wyoming has been a target of Environmental Protection Agency overreach in other areas. I won't bore you with the cases, but there are legion. But I will say that in this particular case, I echo the thoughts that the other dignitaries here have stated. And I noticed something today in the courthouse. There's a display that says, "We're a nation of laws, not of men." And that's the concept that I think I've heard here tonight, and I heard in the courtroom today, that we think and we hope will prevail in this case. We have laws that require the separation of powers, that require Congress, our elected representatives, to make large policy decisions, such as the kind of policy decisions that the EPA was trying to make here, that's not justified by the plain language of the statutes that Congress has passed. And it's very important that the rule of law be recognized and continue to be recognized, regardless of where people stand on the policy issues. Congress is to make the policies on these big issues, and the EPA is to carry it out. And I think that point was made today, and I thought the judges were very attentive. I thought their questions were fantastic, and I remain optimistic that the rule of law will be recognized when this case is finally decided. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're being joined by the Attorney General from Arkansas, correct? Yes, ma'am. I don't know if you want to say a minute or two, or we're just getting ready to close it up, or?
Sure.
Sure.
Happy to. All right. Well, good afternoon. Well, I know that the businesses in Arkansas, but more importantly, the families in Arkansas, are concerned about the so-called Clean Power Plan and what it will do to small businesses across our natural state. It will eliminate jobs across Arkansas. And that's what concerns me as Attorney General, and that's why I'm proud to be part of this effort to push back against the overreach of this administration, because Arkansas families are hurting, and we can't afford a 20% increase every year for the next 12 years, what it would do to not just the businesses, but to the stay-at-home grandmother or mom on a fixed income. So that's why I'm here today, to push back against the overreach of this administration. So thank you all so much.
Great. Well, thank you all very much, and that ends the conference. Thank you.